Well, this is it's actually the 2nd of September, so the autumn storms are needed for the bulbs. I would normally do it on the 1st, but as always I get a bit behind. So let's just see what I do. I'm going to, having repotted a lot of the stuff, I've not repotted it all. So following on last year's slight change, I'm going to add to the top of each pot, which I'll show you some of this. This is just a standard Growmore type 777, which gives me 7% nitrogen, 7% phosphorus and 7% potassium. And the reason for this is it will just add a little bit of nitrogen in with the water, because the water will stimulate, the cooling down with the water will stimulate the roots, and once the roots come, then of course they need a bit of feed, and it's nitrogen that we need to help build the roots. What I've got basically in here, I've got the 2 sizes of pots which I'll show you in a minute, and the measure I've used for the smaller pot, I use one finger and thumbful like that, so just a wee pinch like that onto the top of each. And for the bigger pots I use a pinch, 2 fingers and thumbs, and that's just the amount that I've been putting in. So let me just remove you now from this little tripod. I need to get you into my hand. This is when you're cameraman and everything else all at once. So we're going to come round, and here you can see the 2 sizes of pots. So a wee drop of on there. You'll see that many of the pots have not yet got a top dressing on. I've got the top dressing off. I'll put on gravel once I see the mixture going in and the water going in. So these are the pots looking nice and dry, and this is just a group that I've started to water just prior to filming, and that shows you the difference. Now this year I'm watering this, use whatever you like, but I got this new hose that gives me this nice spray, which I do gently. I don't want to power in, you've got to do it a bit gentle. So the idea is, let's come around here, because just even as I'm working you start to notice already a colchicum flower starting to come up there. So the way we water is we start off with let's start with the fresh bit here. So I'll just go over them all, basically to wet the surface. Let me just move the lid of my fertiliser thing. So I'm just going along the bend. Now there we go, you can see some of them the water's pooling on, it's puddling on the top, while others it's going through. So that's just as the water structure, the soil structure will change. What I'm looking for is that these will all drain very quickly, because there's a lot of aggregate. I will at this stage continue to remove the bits of old leaf debris that's been dropped on. The reason I like to remove this is that once the new growth comes through, when the weather gets cold and damp, this can attract molds, so we don't want that. Now, although the surface of all these pots looks damp because I've sprayed over, it's only the tiniest bit on the surface. If I come down to one here which is damp on the surface and just scrape, you can see how it's barely gone down a few millimetres, that moisture. To get the pots moist, let's just re-water. Once the top's wet, then it's a flood. Each pot is literally flooded up, and then you leave them for a minute and we watch. You can see how some are draining quicker than others. Three have drained quite quickly. This one's a bit slower to drain. But what you will find is that the soil structure is changing. The drainage channels are opening up within the soil, and that's the drainage we need. So there it goes away now. There's it going away now. At the same time as I'm doing this, I will square the pots up if they look to be a bit squint on the ground, on the sand below. I will try and square them up a wee bit. Some of them are often at a jaunty angle, so I will go and square them, and then they stay pushed onto the sand, and they bed in, so there's an actual good contact between the wet sand and the pot. Now then, let's second time flood. You might find if your compost is good, it becomes, and you just got a small hose, it's more difficult to flood them a second time. And then they will drain. This is like watching water drain away. It's not the best video pastime, but it just kind of shows you what I expect now. You can see how quickly that drainage is going. You'll also see some of the fines coming up into the water, because this is part of the structure change that's happening in the soil when the water goes into it. Fines come up to the surface and drainage channels form. You'll now find that this one that was slowest at first is draining quicker than that one. So this is just the structure within the soil changing. And this is what we'll do. I'll continue with this all the way through using my hose, and then once I've gone over all these in this plunge, I'll leave them, I'll go away, and I'll come back in an hour or so and I will soak them all and plunge them again. It's often quite a good idea to have a single pot that you can maybe lift and look underneath, because if I look underneath, there is no moisture got through to the sand plunge underneath at all. So we need to make sure that not only the pots are well soaked, but the sand plunge below is as well. So that's very quickly excuse me, an idea of how I apply the first plunge. The first flood, sorry, for the first flood of the year, and that should ensure the bulbs then stay moist until they start into growth.